How's it going, YouTube? Coming again today with another video, and today, guys, what to bring to you is how to improve as a player. Now, I really do like making videos like this because there's so many different ways to grow in this game, and I feel like talking about as a player means so much more than just your gameplay itself. It's about how you yourself interact in the game, and that's very important because there's so many mental aspects to Yu-Gi-Oh! That I feel like we don't really talk about that much, that I want to bring up today because maybe you haven't thought about these specific ways to really grow in the game, and so I really do hope that this is an avenue to help you get better and things that you can at least think about whenever you're trying to apply these to your gameplay and apply these to the way that you play. So without further ado, before we get started, if you have not already checked out Imperium Duelist, definitely go over to the website and use code GGYGO10. They have this amazing stone tablet oversleeve now, and they also have the Demon Slayer mat on their website. If you're already not familiar either, I actually have a Demon Slayer tattoo, one of my favorite animes, if not my favorite. So wonderful, and I just really love that this mat is there as well because it just looks so clean. So again, if you've not already went on their website, definitely go over there and check it out. It's in the description below. Without further ado, let's go right on over to our very first tip of the day, and let's talk about that. So the first thing that I want to talk about here is going to be making better reads on what your opponent could have. This is very important, and this is something where I was saying that it goes past your gameplay because this is something that you just kind of have to know on the fly. Where if your opponent has a random back row and then you have like an MST effect, maybe you just don't pop the back row and just try to play through it and just assume that it's like an imperm at that point, because if you pop it and you know that that certain deck is on things like Scythe, and then they Scythe block you, and then all of a sudden you're just dead the follow-up turn because you couldn't go into your extra deck, then this is something that was very avoidable. And that's something too where blinding MST was something that has never been correct, and especially when IO is in the game, because if you hit a back row and they chained IO and you didn't just save your removal for the IO, then you just kind of auto lost. And that goes the same whenever you're playing against a more controlled deck against things like Waking the Dragon. This is something where you just kind of lose automatically to something that was very avoidable. So this is something that I really want you to keep in the back of your mind whenever you're playing, is that especially like right now, right, where Despia is easily one of the best decks currently, almost no one is main decking Nibiru. This is something where you can feel a lot more comfortable going first now when you're playing something like Combo, to the point when you don't really have to respect things like Nibiru, but at the same time, don't be surprised if you do get hit with this, because if you're playing against like Dragon, you got to realize that a lot of those decks still main deck the 1 or 2 copies because they can get to it off of the Chaotic Ruler. And especially if you see it in game 1, this is something that you automatically have to respect game 2 and 3. And this is something that you also just have to assume that your opponent has. You just have to assume that your opponent's insane and they just opened everything every single time that you're trying to combo. And you have to be able to play around those cards. Because if you're going to just assume that your opponent doesn't have something and then you play into it and they have it, you're just going to auto lose. So you should always be on the mindset that your opponent has at least 1 to 2 interruptions, and do your best play to at least go around those, because otherwise you're just kind of giving your opponent a free win, and nobody ever wants to do that. The other thing too that I want to mention is that if you have a lot of knowledge about the decks in the format, what they're running, the kinds of cards that they're running, what they're sideboarding, this is very important, especially when Super Poly's in the format. Because if you're playing against Despia and it's games 2 or 3 and your deck actually just loses to a Super Poly, the one back row that they have could quite possibly be a Super Poly, or it's a Branded in red. And this is something where you kind of have to make that read and say like, okay, the back row is going to be a Super Poly. How do I not lose to this right now? And is there a way that I can either bait it? Is there a way I can play through it? Is there a way that I can play around it? And these are the things that will really save you in some of the matches that you're going to be playing, because cards like this are really avoidable, and it's something that if you feel like you can play around it, you just should inherently. Because even when I'm playing Striker, like my 60 card pile going against the Despia deck, and then I go back to going first in like game 2 or 3, I'm not summoning DP. I'm just summoning Griffin, because at that point I just know that I'm not going to get hit with Super Poly. If they just go like normal Albaz and then they use effect, I chain like my card and they chain Super Poly or something, right? This is something where I feel very comfortable knowing that I won't lose to that situation. So really knowing that and using that to your own ability, this is something where making better reads on your opponent really ties into my next point here, and that's building your confidence. Where if you're able to really be able to know what the meta is playing, know what they're siding, know how to play through their boards, know how your board plays through their board, these are things that really do boost your confidence way more than you'd ever know. And this is something where even if you see the board state right now where I have a pretty nice hand, but my opponent has Mirror Jade, Mercurier, Branded in Red, and Cross Out, that's a lot to play through. And so this is something where you also have to just make those assumptions as to what your opponent's back row is. Now, I knew about one Branded in Red, and I did not know about the Cross Out, and he did search the Mercurier. So this is something where you really have to look at your hand and be able to establish the lines of play that you're going for, because I was actually able to go through and break the entire board and set up my own. And this is something where when you're really confident with your deck choice and you really know what you're playing, then you can be miles ahead of everyone else in the room. And this is something where I see a lot of people just picking up a deck last second, then they go to an event and they may not do as well. And this is because if you're already playing against certain decks that you may not be familiar with, and you're playing a deck that you're not familiar with, it's going to be way harder to play the game because you're not only reading their cards, but you're reading your own cards, and you have to make up interactions on the fly that are going to help you later on. And so this is something where I would always recommend the number one rule of Yu-Gi-Oh! And that's always play what you're most comfortable with. Because at the end of the day, that's really all you have going into an event, is your deck and your knowledge of the meta. And that's something that it really does go such a long way if you really do use all of your knowledge against the decks that you may not be familiar with. But yeah, confidence is something that I have a lot of people asking me about all the time about, like, hey, how do you increase it and how do you really feel better about your plays in the game and how you feel better about your worst matchups. And that's really going to be a part of things like your deck building process and really knowing the interactions that your opponent could be doing. And that really stems from being able to play your opponent's decks online. Like the deck that you're most afraid of, go online, play 10 games of it and really understand how it works, because at that point you really know how the deck runs, you know the choke points, you know where they run out of resources fast, and you know if you look at their graveyard what's left in their extra deck, because you can make a very good assumption as to what they have left. All of these things and more can really help you boost that confidence going into the next event. A part of this too is going to be really becoming more observant whenever you're going to a tournament, whenever you lost a tournament and you're just kind of waiting for your friends to finish too. This is something where you can really be able to watch a lot of games going on. Like let's say that your worst matchup is going to be the branded Tribrid deck. So you go to the event and then you're just watching other people play the deck, and then you start seeing what the really common lines of play are, and then you see where it's going to be really good to interrupt them. Let's say you've never played against Dynamorphia before, and so the first thing that you do when you go to the event is that you start playing against somebody and you win your game, and then you, like right after, you peek over to the game beside you and they're playing Dynamorphia. Sit there and just watch the match. Just watch how the deck plays. Just really be able to understand what the cards do, because on the fly, if you win your game 1 and you win your game 2 and then you're off to round 2 and then your next opponent is playing Dynamorphia as well, then you have a better understanding of how that deck works, and that's all because you actually sat there and became more observant about what the meta is doing at the current moment. And this is something too where you can catch on to trends like, hey, my opponent ashed that and that seemed to be really impactful, and so then you're watching another game and then you watch them ash the same card in that matchup and you're like, wow, that seems to be really impactful. And then you play against that deck and then you ash that card in that matchup and you're like, wow, that's just game. Like, these are the things that really do come up, and even if you don't do well in an event, you shouldn't really go on like tilt or anything. You should take that time to really be able to study the meta, because again, you only really get out of this game what you put into it. And that's really one of the biggest things that I can tell you, is being observant in this game is huge. That's something that can really last you a long time, because you just understand what the matchups are and what they're trying to do. So going into my next one though is really, how do you learn how to deal with a loss? I have a lot of people asking me about, like, how do you deal with mauled? How do you deal when you lose? And this is something where you really have to just look at your deck objectively and say, like, was it deck building? Did I misplay? Did they just have more resources and advantage to me? Did I have a way to win that game? And this is something where you can even look at this when you win a game and be like, was there a way that I could have won sooner? Was there a way that I could have played the board better? Did I play my turn less optimal? And these are the reviews that you can really make to push forward in your own gameplay and really be able to make sure that you don't make the same mistakes. Make sure that you do see the lines of just like game earlier on, right? And this is something that it really does go a long way too, where if you do lose, you can't really let that eat you up, and you can't let that be on your shoulder all day, because even at the regional that I just top 8'd, I lost in round 3, and that's a really early time to lose a game. And that's something where I didn't let that affect me whatsoever. I just knew what my deck did, and I knew that I was very comfortable in the format, and I knew exactly what the meta was trying to do, and I knew that I built the best deck in the room at that time. So at that point, I was like, you know what? It's fine. I lost one. We're just going to keep pushing on. We're not going to lose again. And that's one thing where you can't have the X1 mindset after that either. You have to just say, you know, like, okay, I lost this one, but I have 3 wins and I have a loss. And so at that point, you can just be like, all right, but I still have 3 wins. So let's keep it going. Let's get another win. And let's just keep playing like it's round 1, because we don't lose round 1s, you know? And so that's one of the biggest things that I can give you as a tip too, is that you just can't be in the mindset of, hey, I lost and man, that sucks. You just have to keep pushing through, because the second that you lose and that you let it get to you is the second that you just will lose to yourself the rest of the day. And I don't ever want to see that happen to anyone. So definitely try to, if you do lose, just try to use that as their learning experience rather. And then the last thing that seems really small, but it's so big, is make sure that you're getting enough sleep before an event, please. This is one of the things that if you can promise me anything, in the comments down below, tell me that you promise to get enough sleep before your events. This is something that we all meme about in the community, and we all say, you know, like, we'd rather have 3 hours of sleep and go to a regional than not go at all. This is something where it will affect you heavily. It's affected me heavily at events, and I will never do this again. I will always make sure I get enough sleep, because it is a very long day. You should be making sure that you're eating well, making sure that you're bringing like the water jug to the event with you, and that you're really staying on top of your gameplay, because if your own mentality and your own body feels tired, then at the same time, it's going to reflect in your gameplay. So just make sure that you are getting enough sleep, because it really does help you. And I know that again, it seems like a meme, but at the same time, get enough sleep. I do hope that you enjoy these types of videos and really helping to improve. If you've not already checked out Metafy, definitely go over there and see if you'd like a session. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching sessions to try to help improve players as much as they would like, and very specific topics. If you ever have a different one from what I offer, definitely go ahead and PM me on Discord and ask about that certain topic. If you've not already been a part of my Discord, my Twitch, my Twitter, definitely go ahead and follow those down in the links in the description below. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful night, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you all so much.